Have you ever held a baseball bat with dried blood stains on it and known you did the right thing? I have, and that was just the beginning. My name is Jake. I'm 45 and I live in Los Angeles. I'm a trucker. I've spent more than half my life driving a huge truck, crossing the country from end to end. And all these years, I thought I was lucky. Lucky because Susan was waiting for me at home. Today was our 25th wedding anniversary. I woke up early, as usual. I made coffee, put it on the nightstand. Susan was already up, twirling around the house in just her robe. I could smell her scent, warm and cloying, the same scent she used to perfume herself with at the holidays. Only now, there were no guests, no presents, just us. I had a surprise for her. A beautiful gold necklace with 25 years engraved on it. When I gave it to her, she didn't even smile, just said thank you, as if she'd been given something as simple and trivial as new socks. "I'll be right back," she said. "I'm going to Allison's." I frowned. "Allison's? It's our anniversary." "Yeah, I know, but it's an emergency and I need help with some stuff. Don't worry, I won't be long." She packed quickly, put on her necklace without even looking at it, and left. I stood alone in the middle of the living room, staring at the closed door, and felt something inside me clench. It wasn't anger. It was a premonition. I stood alone in the middle of the living room, looking at the closed door. Susan had said she was going to her friend Allison's house, but I knew that no Allison had been out of town for a long time. She'd left for another state 3 years ago, and Susan knew it. My heart didn't just clench, it stoned. The week before, sensing something amiss, I had installed a GPS tracker in her car and a special program on her phone. I got copies of all her calls and texts. I knew she was going to spend the night of our anniversary with someone else. When the door slammed behind her, I went into the kitchen and poured myself a whiskey. I don't drink because my job as a trucker requires mental clarity, but tonight was an exception. I raised my glass to what I thought was a happy married life, which I now knew was a lie. I stared at my laptop screen, where the little green dot, her car, was moving through the streets. I saw her turn into the parking lot of the Royal Inn. I knew she was there, and exactly 18 minutes later, I saw her on the entrance camera. I stared at the screen and my heart burst. She was wearing the same gold necklace I had given her, and she didn't even smile. She was wearing her best dress, and I could almost smell that warm, luscious perfume. She looked like she was going on her dream date. And next to her was the young man I'd seen in the pictures on her phone. He was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Alphonse, athletic, smooth-shaven, with a trendy haircut. He called himself a coach, a psychologist, and posted pictures of himself on social media. I saw him and my blood boiled. He was the complete opposite of me. I sat looking at the screen and thought about the fact that I, a simple trucker who worked day and night to provide for my family, had been cheated. And not just cheated, but robbed. He took from me not my money, but something much more valuable. My faith, my dignity, and my heart. I wasn't in a hurry. I waited. I knew that haste is the enemy of a good deed, and my revenge had to be perfect. Back at the house, I opened her laptop. The password was rudimentary, our wedding date. Within a minute, I was already reading all of her correspondence. "He's getting me something corny again today. I'll be surprised if it's not flowers or some junk," she wrote to someone named Tyler. "You deserve more than that. Men with real energy, of your body, your spirit." I wasn't shaken. I didn't feel indifference. I just read, calmly, as if it wasn't my life being turned upside down. He used to give her earrings. She called him my guru, and me trucker, with a slight irony that was now burning me from the inside out. Half an hour later, I got a notification that her card had been charged for a room rental at the same hotel. "Psychotherapy session," she wrote. I knew it wasn't.
He was filming it for other women under the guise of working with women's trauma. And then I realized the scariest part. He was videotaping these women and putting it on a private channel. I bought access through a frontman. My wife was there. In one of the sessions, she was almost naked, screaming that I was a trucker who was interfering with her mental growth. Everything fell into place. It wasn't just an affair. It was a cult. Time to pack up. I put on my gloves, grabbed my car keys, and drove to the hotel. Not for the showdown. I got a room a floor below and took a small camera with me. I connected to the hotel's Wi-Fi and accessed his laptop through a Trojan program from the correspondence. He was in the room and the recording went live. On the screen, I saw her. Half-naked Susan was sitting in front of this Tyler guy. He was whispering something in her ear, stroking her shoulders, going through her hair. There was no shame in her eyes, only adoration. He called it a session, but I could see what it was. He was slowly and methodically destroying her, and I couldn't stand it. I recorded everything I saw and copied it onto a flash drive. I knew it was my proof. I left the hotel, but I didn't go home. I went to his place, Tyler's. I knew his address from his correspondence, and I knew he lived alone. I parked a couple blocks from his house so no one would see my car. I changed the license plate number that morning just in case. I walked into the house, and it was just darkness. Tyler was gone, but I knew he'd be back soon. I sat down on the couch and I waited. I didn't know how long it had been, an hour or two, but I knew I had to wait. I was ready. I was calm. Finally, I heard the door open. Tyler walked in and I saw him. He was dressed like I had seen him in the video. He screamed when he saw me, but the walls of his house were dense, strong. They muffled his voice to a muffled moan, like panic in his body.
I didn't punch him in the face. I didn't want him to look like a victim. I hit him on the places that would hurt for a long time, his ribs, his legs, his arms. He lay there covering his ribs with one hand, his face with the other, and I just stood there watching him. When I was done, I put the bat on the table and said, "Enjoy the freedom of the spirit, Guru." I walked away leisurely, leaving him alone in the dark. He knew it was revenge, and he knew what I had done. The next morning, Susan didn't go to work. She lay in bed with her back turned to the wall. I could see her puffy eyes, her skin darkening as if she hadn't slept at all. Her fingers trembled as she poured herself tea, and her lips were tightly pressed together as if she might burst into tears at any moment. She didn't ask anything, didn't try to justify herself, she just kept silent. I watched and was silent too. It was on that silence, soaked with fear and the feeling that her world was crumbling, that I began to act. I knew it was easy to break the body, but it was much more interesting to break the illusion of power, to show that you had seen everything, knew everything, and that your silence was a sentence delayed only at your whim. On her phone, I found a hidden folder under the unassuming name Documents. Inside were PDF files with copies of powers of attorney. One of them, executed 4 months ago, authorized Tyler to handle a bank account that was registered to his wife. There were $300,000 in the account. I remembered that was when we sold the old house we had inherited. That money was to pay off the mortgage, and she transferred it to him. If it had only been about the money, I might have found the strength to forgive. But that was just the beginning. The second power of attorney was signed at the same private notary's office where we had once executed car contracts. This time, it was the power to sell our Dodge, registered to me. The signature was mine, but I didn't sign it. It's a fake. Neatly done. Looks practiced. The date was 10 days ago. They were preparing, my wife and this guru. They weren't just going to walk away. They were going to wipe me out, financially, legally, and maybe even physically. But I was quicker. After I found the documents, I went down to the basement where all my archived papers were kept. I found my copies of the signatures on the old contracts and was painfully sure they didn't look forged at all. They were getting ready to steal everything I had.
I gathered all the necessary documents, including forgeries, and took them to my lawyer, whom I trusted more than my wife. I told him everything, and he immediately started preparing a complaint to the police and the Bar Association. He reassured me and told me that we would win the case. Right after that, I went to the bank to open a new account and transfer the rest of the money there. I blocked the old accounts. Now they couldn't get a dime. In the evening, I announced to Susan that I wanted to go away for a week's vacation. She just nodded. I looked at her calmly, like an object whose behavior needed to be recorded and studied, because I knew she wasn't just a lover, she was an accomplice. I didn't sleep at night. I had a flash drive with the camera footage on it. I cut out the parts I wanted and turned the tape on loop. I watched her hand slide over Tyler's shoulder, the way she smiled, the way she leaned in and her eyes closed as if in a trance. This wasn't passion. It was blind, fanatical faith. And then I remembered seeing Tyler's name in some old newspapers. It took some digging through the archives, but I found it. It was a fraud case. He was a psychotherapist, luring women into a paid program and bilking them out of money. There were 7 victims. There was no trial because the case ended in a mediation. Then he changed his name and became a completely different person. Now he's not just a lover, he's a hunter. And Susan is his prey. But now I was the predator. It was 3 in the morning. I recorded a short video with no words, just shots of her face, her hands, the sound of her breathing, the silence. I uploaded it all to hidden cloud storage and signed the file, Level 1. Level 2 was due tomorrow. In the morning at exactly 7, my doorbell rang. Not knocked, but pressed the bell button exactly once, as those who are sure they are right do. There were 2 policemen at the door. They had come to get a statement about the bodily injury. I knew Tyler must have a weakness. Digging around on the forums, I found one of the women who had accused him of fraud. Under an assumed name, I contacted her. She replied that she remembered Tyler because she was still paying off the loan she took for his courses. I asked if he had any weaknesses, and she sent a link to one person. It turned out to be his son, who lived with his mother in another state. I had never touched an innocent, but I had to show I could do it. I created an anonymous letter, attached copies of powers of attorney, chat records, pictures of Tyler, and sent it not to the son, but to his mother, the same woman he had once abandoned. I wrote, "You need to know who your son is growing up with." That evening, I was dealt another blow. Susan didn't come alone. She had 2 men with her. One was huge, with tattoos on his neck and arms, and the other was tall and thin with cold, piercing eyes. I realized that they were either acquaintances of Tyler's or former clients of his. They were smiling, speaking politely, but I could see that it was a show of force, a moral pressure. They talked about how it's important to be strong and not to stop people from developing. I didn't argue. I didn't respond. I just turned on my tape recorder and recorded the whole conversation. When they left, I gave the tape to my lawyer to keep, just in case. That same night, I went outside and set up a camera that recorded everyone coming in and out of our house. I was ready. In the morning, I printed out the letters, just a piece of paper that had a QR code on it and one single sign that said, "Want to know who you work with." That QR code could be used to access the cloud storage where I had collected all the dirt. Bills, powers of attorney, reports, records, Susan and Tyler's correspondence, everything.
First, I drove to the school where Susan taught. I waited until recess, went to the security guard, and handed him a letter for the principal. An hour later, she was called into the office, and 2 hours later, she was escorted out of the school without a scandal, just out the door. She would no longer be a teacher. Then I went to Tyler's office. There was an online conference going on. I joined it and sent a link to my cloud storage to the general chat room. The people attending the conference started reading, and one by one, they left the conference. In the evening, Tyler himself deleted all his correspondence, But it was too late. The screens were already circulating around the network. They were being discussed, and he became a pariah. In the morning, at exactly 5 o'clock, I was hit with another blow. There was a loud and demanding knock on the door. When I opened it, the police were standing there. They had come to search the place. In the garage, in the spare tire of my car, they found a bag of white powder. They detained me and took me to the station, but they didn't keep me there for long. The lawyer arrived after an hour and presented all the evidence I had collected. The footage from the street cameras showed that my car had not left the house for the last 3 days, and a man who looked a lot like Tyler had snuck into my house at night. After I was released, I sent all the evidence I'd collected, videotapes, forged documents, taped conversations, and witness statements to the prosecutor's office. I had no doubt that they would scrutinize the case because it wasn't just fraud, but attempted drug planting. Tyler and Susan were arrested. Their lawyer, hired by Tyler, was powerless in front of my lawyer. All the evidence was against them, and they had to plead guilty. I didn't want them in jail, so I asked the court to have them sentenced to community service, and Susan was stripped of all rights to inheritance and property. A year after all this happened, I got word that Tyler had been arrested for fraud, and Susan, who was left without a job or friends, left town to start a new life. I, on the other hand, had started a new life. I quit my job as a trucker, sold my house, and bought a small house on the beach. I found a new job that I like and met a woman who loves me for who I am. My children are grown, and I am a happy grandfather. I don't regret what happened. After all, it was that betrayal that helped me become who I am today, a strong, successful, and truly happy man.